All right. So yeah, it's good to have you on board, Pat. And well, I guess to start, I know you do different things. So for those who don't know you, what exactly are you working on right now?
Yeah, lots of things. I'm mainly involved in the online sales space, remote selling in particular. At the moment, my main projects are a community called The Collective, which is, specifically for sales professionals who are looking to go to that next step of their career and maybe get off, making commissions only as their income. So that's a big project of mine. We talk a lot of different things, joint venture partnerships, equity deals, launching your own offers and sales management, like just to name a few. That keeps me pretty busy. And then apart
Yeah.
from that, I've got my own projects where, I own equity in some businesses. There's some businesses that I've invested in that I'm looking to, help grow as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd say I like to remain active in selling and sales management as well, just to keep, my finger on the pulse and uh, try to keep my ear on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because you're very experienced in terms of the background you have in like corporate and all the career you had prior to the online space.
Mm.
And you're actually, yeah, doing deals. You've built and sold businesses, if I'm not wrong.
Yes.
But you're very casual about it. And I wanna, I wanna acknowledge that because not everybody has that, yeah, just, you know, level of it's not a big deal. It's what I do, especially in the online space
Yes.
where everyone is kind of exaggerating stuff. And so I want to acknowledge you because
Thank you.
from the time that we worked together and I'm part of your collective, you've
Mm,
always been very just down to earth and humble and curious to really learn about people and see how you can help. And so, yeah, that's really cool.
totally. Yeah,
Yeah, for
appreciate
sure.
it.
Yeah, and you mentioned that you have equity in some businesses. What kind of businesses?
The main one is a mortgage-based business, where we're basically like a non-bank lender
Mm.
here in Australia. So we get our funding directly from, uh, well, like where banks get them from, basically, is where we get our funders. We have two major funding partners that basically lend us. Well, they don't lend us; they give us access to their capital so that we can deploy it. We don't necessarily deal directly with retailers. We deal with the mortgage brokers, who then are our distribution channels. So that's a big project, which is a long-term project. We've been working on that for quite some time now. Um, but licensing everything else takes some time, and we're kind of in a position now where we're writing our first deals, which is exciting. Um, and then recently partnered with a young entrepreneur, young female entrepreneur, on a basically like a real creative type of business called Smart Sketch,
Yeah.
where we kind of distill down ideas. And that's been a really fun project to be part of. Lots of things that we're trying to learn and sort of guide her to do. So excuse me, I'd love to do more and get involved with more entrepreneurial young people as well. Just if I can kind of steer them in the right direction, or help them avoid mistakes that I've done. I think that could be a really cool thing, and cool to be part of their growth too, right? So that's something
Oh,
that I want to get into a lot more for sure.
yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. What do you enjoy the most about that?
Uh, I think hanging around with youth is a good thing, because just the way they think, the way they've been brought up in this world, which is a lot more, let's say, digital and different to when I was growing up. But also, I think there's some qualities that can be quite infectious of someone who is a go-getter and someone who um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of go-getters out there, but some people are just visionary go-getters, and I think that has a lot of appeal in terms of keeping myself quite creative as well. So I find it interesting to have those interactions, and like I do with most, I learn from people that are way ahead of me or way behind where I am. So I think that's a good interaction. That's a good exchange of energy between us. So that's that kind of what attracts me to it. But also, I just like people who build big things They're not always the smartest people. They're not always they're not even the most like resourceful people, but they're quite creative. So it's good to be around that as well, for sure.
Interesting. And with all the things that you have going on, how do you prioritize?
Yeah. Um, at the moment, so when before I had before my wife and I had our daughter, prioritizing was fairly easy. Prioritize work, health, and spending some time with each other. When you have a kid, priorities change a little bit. All of a sudden, there's someone that needs your time.
Hmm.
Especially if you want that involvement really early on. And I did. That's everything revolves around like family time, spending time with my daughter. So
Mm.
I guess that's priority first, and then I manage my calendar around that. Usually not the other way around.
Yeah.
Where it was like that before. When we first had her when she was younger. Um, well, when we very first had her, I would prioritize a little bit of the work. But as she's like a few months old, a few months into it, it's just like that feeling that you don't want to miss out on anything. So then I started prioritizing more around the time that I can spend with her and my wife.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Yeah, again, I organize my work schedule and calendar around them. And then it's just making sure that each week I have set aside like particular amount of time for each of the projects. Some projects don't need it much. Some they'll come into season and there's a lot of work that needs to be done with it. And I just try to prioritize the things that aren't necessarily a drain on my energy, things that I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good uplift, to
Yeah.
kind of keep pushing on. Right?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because, well, that's one of the reasons why I want to start this series of interviews and this podcast and this new project around energy, habits, productivity,
Mm,
focus,
yeah,
because uh, we usually focus or we usually talk about just the external things, right? Like the
yes,
the outcomes or the money or the results, and we often forget that it actually comes from those intangible, small kind of daily building blocks that
yeah.
compound over time. So for you, what are some of those like small things that give you the energy
Mm,
to keep going?
yeah. Um, I said at the start of the year that any projects that I would get involved with have to run through certain criteria, and I think I've shared them, with you.
Yeah.
Projects have to have a certain thing for me to get involved in the first place. So that's been a real good benchmark and a good help in terms of what projects I stay on or I get off. That's one thing is being able to have a filter. The other thing is because a lot of the businesses that I get involved with are relatively people based, meaning there's a lot of interaction with the consumers or the people that are a part of the business. So I like to get involved with things where the people that I am interacting with are people that I want to be interacting with because it's a good thing to do that. Not necessarily, businesses where maybe I like the product, but the people buying the product, I'm not really, not connected with. I
Yeah.
think that's a drain on energy. Also, making sure that if I'm working on a project, that again the right people are the ones that I can relate to the most. Because without it, you're kind of fighting things a little bit. When you're not necessarily in tune with maybe the avatar that you're working with. So I find that's really helpful on energy. And then all the other things I think exercise, movement, blood flow is
Hmm.
always a good thing. That and also stillness, which is difficult. I
Hmm.
struggle with it, but it's something that I'm trying to implement a lot more is to be more still,
Yeah.
not just in the body but in the mind. So it's like a combination of those things. I think keeping a little bit more centered in that way something that I'm leaning to right now. And I was talking to somebody today, one of our members, and we were talking about maybe some of the, let's say, limiting things or limiting traits that they have. And, I was kind of thinking about it. There's always pros and cons to things. There's always positive and negatives to your imperfections, let's say, or maybe what personally what might be lacking. And I
Yeah.
was saying sometimes it's easier to work around your limitations rather than eliminating your limitations. Sometimes it takes longer to do that, but
Mhm.
if you can work around it and see the out of every limitation, there's an opportunity that that could be a better way to at least keep moving forward. So you know,
Mm.
it's kind of what I'm thinking about and working on at the moment.
Yeah, interesting. And how are you doing that specifically, working around your limitations right now?
Well, first things first is you got to understand what they are when they come up. I think it's hard to list out, okay, these are what my limiting beliefs are, or this is where maybe I've got shortcomings, until you actually, it comes to realization or it comes to time of implementation or whatever that is. I mean, that could be, that this particular thing we're talking about is, oftentimes, maybe they overthink things, right? And that could be a negative thing, but it also could be a positive thing that they want to get like a good message out there, or they want a good product out there. So, but of course, there's a balance between getting things done and holding things back. So, if you know that is your limitation, what are the things that you can do in order to overcome that? Maybe you need somebody to bounce ideas off. Maybe you need somebody that can help validate things for you. And there's nothing wrong with you if that's the case, right? As long as
Mhm.
you're aware of it. I think if you're unaware, then that in itself is a different situation. But I think if you're aware that you have a tendency to overthink, but you have somebody that can help validate you, I think that's one way that you're working around it, right? Because it takes a long time to get rid of these limitations. It takes a lot of hard work and a lot of mistakes. But in doing that, sometimes if you just focus on that, you might be missing out on things that can actually help you get past it by taking action and, again, working around maybe what these limitations are. So
Yeah.
awareness is number one. Just understanding, you know, maybe you are an overthinker. Maybe, you're a bit slower to act on certain things. Maybe you're too quick to act on certain things, right? And just understanding that and finding a way to, I guess, find that balance so that you can move forward. I think I think that's a good thing to have.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Everything starts with self-awareness. And because you've been in the space for a long time and you've worked with many
Mm.
different, for instance, with many different sales reps, what do you think is the biggest limiting belief that you've seen with salespeople?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot, I think. And it comes in different shapes and sizes. I think a common one is the lack of belief. This might sound, maybe a bit harsh, but I think a lot of sales rep lack belief in themselves that they need external factors to happen in order for them to succeed. Um, I think that's a massive one, if anything, and it's the most recent one anyway that I've come across. Um, there's always, if someone's going into an offer, you're always checking on like marketing, like who are the reps that are in there, what are they doing, like what's the potential, and sometimes, and it's a good measuring, yardstick. It's a good
Mhm.
metrics to see because historically that's what can happen, but sometimes people judge the opportunity based on the external things rather than,
Mhm.
okay, maybe because I'm so passionate about, as long as there's alignment, right? But maybe because I'm passionate about this or I like working with these types of people, that those standards or those numbers that the metrics that people are sharing or the business owners are sharing or where they're at the moment, I can take that and I can turn it around into something different,
Mm.
So um, when you base what your potential performance is or your potential performance can be versus other standards or direct comparison with what's already happening, sometimes people fall prey to that and then they skip the opportunity, whereas I made a post or maybe even last year, where I said, I go where most sales reps don't want to go as far as a business is concerned, because I like to see the opportunity. I like to take on the challenge of being able to build something off the back of it.
Yeah.
So, I think with that sort of limiting belief, people miss out on like brilliant opportunities. Maybe they just haven't thought about it. Maybe they're not creative enough to do
Mm.
that. But, that's the most obvious one that I see all the time. And if things
Yeah.
don't happen the way they want it to happen, then because in the remote space, you can just skip out, give 7 days notice and you're out, and then you're into something else. Right.
Yeah.
So again, I don't think people hit their full potential because of their own limitations of how they view things, how to analyze deals, how they look at all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. And it's like a downward spiral, right? Because if someone doesn't have that self-confidence, or maybe they're looking for some kind of external, yeah, silver bullet,
Mm.
and even if they do find the dream offer, because of their internal limitations, they will find a way to mess that up, right?
Yes,
Or
totally.
blame others, or put responsibility
Yeah.
on someone else, and
Yes.
then it creates even more self-doubt, and then it kind of that's that kind of negative cycle. So
Yes.
how do you think, and salespeople specifically, how do you think we can develop that self-confidence? Or have you always been that way, or how have you developed
No.
that yourself?
Um, I mean, I remember where I spent most of my time in sales in the corporate world in finance. I started as a cold caller. I think the issue at the moment is that there's so much information out there. When I started as a cold caller, I had no idea like where I was going to go and what I could go with it. It's just this is the opportunity. You call enough people,
Hmm.
and the advice that I got is if you stick around long enough, you're going to make it pretty far. And that's what I did. I just outlasted most of the people who were there until I got good enough to then be recognized. Okay, well now you can run a team. Now you can run a state. Now you can run the whole country. Now you can run the business. So, each of those stages, I didn't really know what to expect. There wasn't as much information as there is now. I think sometimes information is kind of the roadblock because then people lose the ability to think for themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that's a problem in itself because it's then become reliant. You know, sometimes they use it as a crutch. Is that,
Mhm.
this is how I should be, how I should be doing it. So I think that's definitely, an area. The second thing is I think most sales reps are really afraid to fail because,
Mhm.
and I don't think it's their fault necessarily because a lot of their lives are lived on social media. So when they share
Mhm.
stuff and it doesn't go well, that might not come back that well on them, right? But there's always
Yeah.
there's always context behind it, and I think if there's context behind, like, I mean, if you leave a job after a week because you don't like it, that's not a good look. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So that's the type of failure that I'm talking about. I'm talking about like if you have a really good go at something and you just failed, I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. And I talk about it a lot, inside our community about, like if you fail faster, you learn faster, you move on a lot quicker, and then people forget anyway, right? People forget that stuff. You only as there's a saying, you're only as good as your last month. Well, if
Yeah.
you failed last month and you don't have another go at it, then you're a failure, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you keep taking a shot, I think eventually something will land, and you just make the most out of that, and then you double that into the next thing that you do, and you parlay that into the next thing that you do after that. But I think, yeah, the most successful people, I think the main one of the big differences is just they just try stuff and they do
Mhm.
it like at speed that you don't even notice that they're doing it. So I think those are a couple of things for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100%. And it comes back to that, um, well, the competence that is developed through constant failure. For instance, when you were cold calling, and I remember when I started in remote sales as well, and I was just, cold calling as well. selling $47 copywriting courses and getting hung up on day in and day out. And
Crazy.
and it was brutal, but it helped me develop that grit and that confidence, and also through the competence, because I obviously got better at it after so many
Mm.
reps. So how do you think reps can overcome that fear of failure?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. There's many ways to do it. I think one of the ways that you can do it is, especially with entrepreneurial salespeople, if there's things that's on your mind, you just got to get out and try it. The worst thing that you can do is have an idea in your head and leave it there for 12 months, and then when you try it, you don't like it, then you've just wasted 12 months on that idea, right? So I think being proactive in that way is really good. Sales reps that get on, offers and things like that, where maybe entrepreneurship is not their thing. I mean I've seen some really successful people that are like that, and it's probably more the norm than anything else. So if someone wants to, I guess, get to those stages, there's no substitute for activity. Like there's just no substitute for just doing the reps, like literally dialing the phones, getting on as many calls as you possibly can. Then you've got some data points that you can look at. Maybe you're good at this part of the call, but you suck at this part, so you need to build on that. Maybe you're good at this part and you need to develop your style a little bit more. Like all those answers will come if you've got enough data. It's just, because people give up so easily, they just don't get that feedback from themselves or for themselves when that happens. So I think it's just, again, there is no substitute for activity. Learn from people that are successful. What are they doing? Um, and maybe it's not a case of, if you're modeling success, someone who's like 10 steps ahead of you, maybe you need to model someone who's like one step ahead of you. You know what I mean? So sometimes when people try to implement or emulate those that are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 steps ahead, just don't have that context
Yeah.
of what they're implementing exactly. So I think that's a way to do it.
Yeah, no, 100%. It reminds me of also one of the reasons why I wanted to start this new project talking about like energy and habits and all those small kind of internal things is because my my teachers, the Buddhist monks and meditation teachers, and when I started meditation many years ago, they used to say that our mind is extremely powerful, like it's the most complex, powerful computer in the world,
Yeah,
and it
totally.
allows us to, create technology and basically make the invisible visible, right? And
Yes.
everything it's kind of what Steve Jobs said, everything that we see uh, starts in our head in an idea, and that's the power of the mind. However, what they used to say was that there's something more powerful than our mind, and that is our habits, like
Mm,
the daily
yes.
actions that actually control the patterns in the mind, and
Mm,
neurologically that control the wiring of the brain. And so you mentioned something earlier, which is how obviously you exercise, but you're aware of the importance of stillness. So how is that coming up for you right now? And like, why do you feel it's so important for you to cultivate stillness in a world of so much information
mm.
and distraction and overwhelm?
I think that's it. I think it's because of the distraction that can lead to overwhelm, because of all the information that can lead to, all of those things. I just find sometimes when my attention isn't necessarily always on, anything. I mean, it could be anything, right? Like especially, let's say, work, or thinking about the next call, or thinking about marketing, thinking about whatever it is. Um, I think getting that stillness just gives you the chance to step away from it and look at it from a different perspective, a different angle. Um, like with what is it? Let's say you're building a puzzle, right? There's bits and pieces everywhere, and then you start putting it together. And then when you get really close to the project, or like a painting, right, where you're so close to
Mhm.
it, like it's just a bunch of colors, but then you step away, then it's this beautiful piece. I think that's kind of what stillness would mean if
Mhm.
I was able to implement more of it. Um, is then I could see the whole picture rather than just the color itself. Because sometimes we're so close. We're so close to it. That's why if you're on calls back to back every single day, if you don't switch off from that, and if you have a good day, it doesn't always translate the next day. So you
Hmm.
have to reset yourself, to do that. And I think that's probably more reactionary than being proactive. That's
Mm.
why, yeah, if there can be some sort of, and that could be like a guided 10-minute meditation, or it could be just sitting still with no devices for a period of time. I like to exercise if I'm going for a run, not to leave my phone at home and not put any music on,
Yeah.
because now I can just run and think about my footsteps, and my heartbeat and my breath, and those sort of things. I think that would be more like a mind stillness, I guess, even though
Hmm.
physically you're moving.
Yeah.
Sitting down has always been hard. Like sit there still
Hmm.
just to not think about anything can be hard. So
Hmm.
I use there's some great apps, and I'm sure you can share what you use for stillness.
Yeah.
Um, but non-sleep deep rest, I find that's I've been getting into that for 10 minutes, which I think through that guidance, and you get a bit more energy kick out of it as well. Um, so yeah, that's kind of what I've been
Yeah.
working on. Definitely not
Yeah.
an expert at it.
Yeah. No, for sure. It reminds me also the Buddhist monks. They used to say that it's kind of like, again, operating a very complex computer without resetting it from time to time, without turning it off, or without cleaning the malware. Like keeping 100 million different tabs open at the same time, like eventually it's gonna slow down, it's not gonna work properly. And or like having a camera and wanting to see clearly, but you're shaking all the time and there's no clarity, versus having a good tripod and a good base, so that everything is moving on the outside, but from a perspective of stillness and clarity.
Mm,
So I suppose what would be a good yeah, good advice for people that are starting out in sales, people that are, well, or even people that are experienced and that have been around.
mm.
What advice would you give them?
Um, Yeah, I think understanding what the pathway is that they want to get to is important. Understanding what sort of income, um, but probably the biggest advice is sometimes you just got to limit the amount of people that you are listening to, or limit the amount of content that you're consuming. What you feed your brain can make a big difference, right? You feed it a lot of shit, like that's the output that you're going to have. So I think you got to pick your mentors wisely. Um, Understand that it's not always about like the selling itself, that there's more to it than that. How you look after yourself, how you show up, how you approach the work itself. It's a great space to be in. But if you focus purely just on the selling, you're going to get stuck. you know, at some point in time, you're going to get stuck. So,
Yeah.
got to be mindful of that. Got to be mindful of, again, the people who you listen to. It's not a one size fits all type of scenario, in the space.
Mm.
And I think what would be good to model people, not necessarily with what tactic strategies that they share, but how they live their life, and what they value. And if you vibe with that, and that's kind of what you want to get to,
Mhm.
then they would be worth listening to.
Yeah.
So that would be the biggest thing I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Especially with so much information, so many coaching programs, so much content, so many just information and information points out there that can kind of cloud
Mm,
people's perception,
yeah, for sure.
versus actually taking time to think, what do you
Yeah,
want and who do you want to
what it,
work with.
exactly.
So yeah,
And
that is
one thing
something.
I'll say, Daniel, I know the project that you're working on at the moment, in terms of like habits and energy. I think that's probably the most underrated thing, and probably something that most new people don't think about
Mm,
until they hit that point in their career. So if they can have that awareness, if they can see, again, the pros and cons of different pathways, and how important it is to manage yourself. I think not only will you be successful, but you also get, a bit more longevity in the
Mm.
game. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. Cool. Well, I think you have
Awesome.
something else coming up. So again, I appreciate your time and I've enjoyed the conversation. How can we support you, Pat?
Um, yeah, I mean, we've got a good YouTube channel that's in my name. There's
Yeah.
some content that goes in there on Facebook. Pretty easy to find on Facebook. I talk about sales. I talk about all kinds of stuff like that. For the more experienced people, definitely check out the collective community. I
Mhm.
know, Daniel, you're part of it. You've been a great member as a founding member of it. We're really leveling up in terms of like all aspects of sales, not just sales itself, not just getting into and sticking to sales. There's a lot more wider variety. So if you're an entrepreneurial sales professional, the collective community might be something to check out for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 100% if you want to not just um, be distracted by other coaching programs and then more information, but have a real peer-to-peer community, then
Mm.
yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. Awesome, Pat. Well, again, I appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Really
Daniel.
enjoyed this,
That
and
was
we'll
really
talk
cool.
soon.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right,
Cool,
brother.
man.
See ya.
Thanks, Daniel. Talk soon, man.